threw herself down on the bed, and at once, without any kind of preliminary, in the most coarse, horrible way you can imagine, pulled up her skirt. He stopped himself standing. Oh, hey there! We were just reading the book 1984 by George Orwell.
You know, we're not too far into it right now. I mean, you could join us if we like.
Does that sound good to you, Brian?
That's fine, this book's awesome.
Alright, well, would you guys like to join us? Alright, go ahead and get yourself situated. Whoa, dog! We know it's a great novel, but you gotta hold your horses. Go ahead and sit down, guys, and get ready for one of the greatest rides of your life. Literature. Chapter 1. It was a bright, cold day in April, and as the clocks were striking 13, Winston was sitting in his home. He was sitting on the couch wearing his overalls, the likes of which everyone had to wear. Winston was watching Big Brother, as Big Brother watched him. Even the slightest facial twitch would make Winston liable to be captured by the thought police. His apartment was a shabby little place. No apartment was nice nowadays. Winston sat there and realized his overwhelming hunger. He moved towards the fridge, hoping to find something to eat. Nowadays, everything was rationed, and it was extremely hard to find even the basic necessities such as sugar or salt. Luckily, Winston stumbled upon something to make a sandwich with. All around his apartment, there were posters of Big Brother, constantly watching him. Winston moved towards the couch, sat down, and began to make his sandwich. Anybody would eat anything nowadays, because you had to scrounge just to survive. As he put the finishing touches on his ketchup sandwich, he began to lift it towards his lips. But just then, the television changed. It was now broadcasting military programming instead of constantly watching him. This was his perfect opportunity. He knew he had to move into the corner fast, while nobody was watching him. He began to sit down, and then very slowly and delicately, so as to not cause any noise, began to pull out his diary. His diary was his way of rebelling against the government. He was one of the last people left in Oceania to truly think for themselves. The corner was his safe haven. It was the one place in his apartment where absolutely nobody could see him. He wrote things in his diary that if the thought police found out about, could easily get him tortured or killed.
So wait a minute, does the government control everything?
Oh, Brian. Silly Brian. Brian, would you like to take this one, Mike?
I'd be happy to, Jordan. Okay, Brian, you see, there were many different ministries. The Ministry of Plenty, the Ministry of Truth, Love, and Peace. And they controlled many different aspects of people's lives. Their slogan was, war is peace, freedom is slavery, and ignorance is strength. You got that, Brian? Perfect. You got that, Brian? Good.
Let's continue. There was a smell.
Whoa, Joey, whoa! You haven't explained Winston yet.
Oh, Winslow. Alright. Well, Winston Smith was an average male inside of this horrible microcosm they called Oceania. His name was Winston Smith, and he hated Big Brother, but he couldn't show it through his emotions because Big Brother could detect anything through any movement. So he had to hide it inside of him for all those years, just letting it build up and build up, until finally, as you read, he made a diary, which is one of the highest crimes, called a thought crime, against the government. Thought crimes are punishable by nothing other than torture and death. Now that I've explained Winston a little bit, let's delve back into the book. We were back inside of the dreary place. Winston was now hard at work in his office in the Ministry of Truth. His job was to change people's names who had been terminated and create whole new people out of them. Winston did his job quickly so as to get done and go home as fast as he could. Even while at work in one of the government buildings, Winston was constantly being watched. Winston began heading for the door. His day of work was over. He quickly walked out of his office, heading home from a long day's work, when he ran into Julia, the temptress that he saw from down the hallway. As she had fallen into him and then arose suddenly, Winston had noticed something strange about the whole situation. There was now a note in his hand. Let's pause for reflection.
You're right. Okay, Brian, you see, in 1984, it was illegal to love a woman. It was only proper to create a baby for the party. That was the only way it was permitted, but you could not love the woman.
Precisely.
There's a character that gets introduced named Julia.
Do you know about Julia, Brian? Julia is a character who in the very beginning of the book, Winston truly thinks is part of the Thought Police due to her band which she wears around her waist, representing chastity, and her always looking eye at Winston. But he later finds out that she actually loves him, and this is why she's been so intently staring at him the whole time. She wasn't spying, she was in love with him. And Winston, now realizing this, wants to act upon his urges towards Julia. Alright, let's continue on with the book.
Ooh, this part gets good.
Yeah, Brian, this is a little bit PG-13, so you might have to cover your ears for a little bit. I think you're ready.
He's good.
As we get back into the book, Julia is just arriving in the room, and Winston is waiting for her. Winston waited patiently for his woman to come into their secret hiding place. She looked gorgeous as she entered. The magic produced by them staring into each other's eyes could not even be described in words. They had waited too long for this moment, and it had finally come. Winston looked at the beauty before him, and it was all he could do to hold himself back from... Their making love was an unspeakable act, and it wouldn't soon go unpunished. As soon as they had done the deed, they were quickly caught by the Thought Police. The Thought Police had begun interrogating Winston. He was helpless to all that they did to him, sitting in a chair, strapped down, and bloody. As brutally as they could, they began yelling at Winston and demanding that he stop thinking. Winston cried out in agony. He felt like the last man in Europe. He was the last man who truly thought for himself. Then, they pulled out something horrible on him, his greatest fear. Rats. They had a box of them there, and they were prepared to put Winston's head in it and have them gnaw his flesh to the bone. Unless he did the last act that would truly make him submissive. Winston finally gave in. The Thought Police had accomplished their goal. They had brainwashed the last man in Europe. And now, he was about to be taken to one of the...
Slow down, Jordan. We're out of time.
Oh, so we are. Well, we've just begun the ending of the book, Brian. So if you want to hear what happens next, feel free to go home and read the book for yourself. It's a pretty epic novel. Let's go watch some TV.
You're right.